Hello and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back.
Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm a little tired these days. I've just been, for whatever reason, it's been busy. Last week was like a 4-day work week, and I just felt like I was just going. Ooh, it feels like things are ramping up. Although this is the time in our area, kids are starting to go back to school. So it's just kind of a new pattern for life, and it just kind of messes with things a little bit.
Do you have the curriculum night yet?
The what?
Curriculum night, school night.
Oh, yes, curriculum.
Yeah.
Yes, the curriculum night. Maybe. I mean, my kids are older now. They're like in high school. I have two in high school now, so like we don't really do like curriculum nights as much. I guess it would be more like, meet your teachers, say hello, and then you kind of let it go from there.
Yeah, we had to do ours, and man, I wish I could send a single representative. It would be so much easier. My wife insisted I came.
Yeah.
Like one parent, give me the information. And I realized too, as soon as we sat in class, I wouldn't be able to survive.
Oh, yes. Did they, one of the things that are funny, my wife was a teacher for a number of years, and she would look at the parents and then observe the kids and be like, oh yeah, yep, this kid is related. Like I can see why. This is why this kid acts this way, Oh, and I think they could. I mean, the teachers could go in there, Tommy, when they see you and they see you sit down at the desk and you can't sit still and you're just kind of looking around. You're like a million miles an hour, and they're like, "Yep, this is Tommy's child. I can. The Puglia children, we can see exactly who their dad is. They know right away." Especially the boys, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was standing in the back and I'm like getting completely antsy. I'm writing in my daughter's notebook, just scribbles. I'm like, oh yes, this is back in the day, my friend.
Amazing. All right, let's go into our what our topic is today, and then we'll do the news real quick. Our topic today is around planning your capacity, which is great timing because I believe an article was just posted recently. Kim Manis just shared it. There's a whole section around the capacity planning guide. Strategic planning, planning your deployment, scale for decentralized analytics, scale for centralized analytics, manage growth and governance. So the timing of this couldn't be better about talking about capacity. Articles are already dropping. And I think this is actually really relevant because organizations need to figure out the best way to organize their company. And I think Alex Powers told me something recently that I think this is very relevant with, is people are trying to what they call min-max their capacity, right? Get the maximum amount of performance with the minimum amount of cost, right? Min-max, right? Mining the price and maximizing the usage. And I 100% agree. Like, yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't want to do this because this is basically maximizing your investment in Microsoft. So this is why people are trying loading data different ways, trying to figure out, do I use notebooks? Do I use pipelines? Like, what's the most efficient way of getting something done? And I think that's fair. That's the idea of a data platform. When you give us a Swiss Army knife, we're going to figure out which part of the tool is the best one to use. So anyways, that's the main topic today. Let's get into some news items. Tommy, tell us about what's coming up here for live events.
Well, the major live event is the Chicago Power BI / Microsoft Fabric user group is back in person on October 2nd at 3:00. We're meeting downtown at the Aeon building. It's where we normally meet the Microsoft office just north of Millennium Park. And what we're doing is a crash course on Fabric. So for a lot of you, you've probably seen the videos, we've talked about it, but maybe your organization doesn't have it. Maybe you just want to play in a tenant that the people who are driving don't care if they break something. And maybe want to try something out for themselves. So we're going to really take advantage of being in person. Me and Mike are going to deliver live in person, going through all the things in Fabric, getting questions, trying things out, what people want to see. That'll probably be my tenant. And we're just going to really allow that time together. There'll be food, networking, all that jazz. And also, it's at 3 p.m., not our normally 6 p.m. in the evening.
Correct. So just jumping in there about that one. So, Tommy, quickly, what kind of things, what parts of Fabric do you think we're going to be touching? We're probably going to be touching the lake house, the analytics endpoint. We'll probably do some things in notebooks. What other areas, Tommy, would you like to touch? Now, this version of this one, so we probably won't hit everything, but anything else that you're thinking of, Tommy?
I have a good feeling people are going to be asking about notebooks and warehouses, and also we look at the SQL database? How can we connect to it?
SQL database, yes, that's another good one. Excellent. Okay, great. So we'll go through those things. The idea is show up, bring your own computer. Tommy will have his Power BI tenant available for you, and you'll play around with some things in there, and we'll start from there. All right. That being said, another event that we would like to push out here is Pittsburgh SQL Saturday. There'll be another event coming here. I'll put the link here in the description. So for both of these, for the Chicago event, here is the link inside the description. It's also in the description of this video as well. But if you'd also like to visit Pittsburgh SQL Saturday, that event is also coming up. And the more details are in the link here in the description as well. All right, Tommy. Any other news items that you have? I don't think we have anything else.
No, I don't have any news items. We talked about the refresh templates and we talked about the August update, so I don't have anything else.
Let's move on into our main topic. We'll have a welcome caller of today. We appreciate you being with us. Stephanie Bruno is with us today.
Hey.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for picking up the call.
No problem. Stephanie is the one running the Pittsburgh SQL Saturday event, and that will be on October 18th. If I'm correct. Is that right?
That's right. Thank you for that shout out. We would love to meet some new friends there in Pittsburgh. So come join us there. And also, if you're excited about what Tommy and Mike were just talking about with Fabric, we also have a free pre-day for a Fabric analyst in a day training. So if you go to that registration, join us. You can also sign up for that.
Wonderful.
Very nice.
All right. Let's kind of unpack the main topic here. And Tommy, I'm going to kind of kick this one over to you, kind of like, where we start, where we take this thing. There is, and again, I want to preface this with capacity planning. This is more around a Fabric experience, right? So I want to just kind of maybe level set a little bit here. There is per user licensing. This is something a lot of people get tripped up in, what kind of licensing is involved with different Fabric experiences, or even just Power BI in general. So there's per user licensing, pro and premium per user. The number of people you have is how much you pay. But at larger companies, that scale doesn't really fit. It's too expensive for companies to buy single individual licenses for every user. So when you get to larger scale things, or you're trying to do special embedded or ISV related things, there's different capacities you could buy. And so there's, a lot of strategy that can go around. How do you build that capacity? What does that look like? So today's conversation will really be around capacity planning. Tommy, take it from there. What other things should we talk about?
Yeah, again, we're making this migration from our normal Power BI licensing, your Power BI Premium per user, which still exists, but Power BI Premium, gone, more or less. Unless you still have it, you can get grandfathered in, but it's really transforming into your Fabric F SKU licensing, which includes all the A embedding, which would be A, and your P premium. But the difference here is now any organization who wants to sign up for Power BI Premium gets Fabric. Now they don't have to use anything in Fabric. They don't have to use notebooks. They don't have to use any lakehouses, Spark, whatever. They can just keep doing semantic models and data flows Gen 1.
Yep.
However, and I believe too, even the capacities themselves are the same sizes as the premium. The capacity units.
Slightly, yes, Tommy. They've aligned the pricing so it matches. It's within like $50 of whatever the original pricing was, right? So
yeah.
I think that the key thing to note here is we're moving from a per user license, which basically means a user has access with certain limits, right? A pro user can only have a database or a semantic model side of 1 gigabyte and lower, right? If you have smaller to medium sized data sets, a pro user might be just fine. But when you get into larger data set sizes, you have to start thinking about, okay, then upgrade my user to a premium per user, which is a premium capacity. It unlocks some of the threshold for that user. But when we start talking about capacity planning, this is where we move away from per user licensing to dedicated machines, or you're buying dedicated capacity from Microsoft. Again, this is very kind of boring because the two licensing models are very different, right? It's user-based with limitations, but then you move over to premium. And then with premium, you get like all the bells and whistles, but you now have different restrictions. Anyways, does that make sense what I'm describing there? It's kind of confusing.
No, it gets confusing. So, and I think for a lot, starting off is how do you guys see capacity planning being a lot different in the Fabric in terms of, I think a lot of organizations are like, well, we have a lot of data coming through, but this is really the first time we actually have to think about the different products that are also going to be a big part of that. So for you, Mike, for you, Stephanie, have you guys taken a look at how you're actually planning for capacities? Or no, the F2 is fine, or my normal one's fine, but has it changed because of the products and the features?
Well, I think one thing to also point out is there is no per user licensing for Fabric. So when you're talking per user, that's just Power BI world. So for
that's
Fabric,
a really good point.
We do need an actual F SKU.
And again, we're going to add more insult to injury here, right? Because if you're creating things in a workspace that has Fabric, like if you're the content creator, you still need a pro license. So like, even though you're getting Fabric as a capacity, if you're the one showing it to the workspace and using the workspace, unless you're under an F64 to use PowerBI.com, you still need a pro license. So like there's like a double, there's like a gotcha.
But only for Power BI items, not for Fabric items. So you don't need it if you're just creating a notebook or a pipeline, right? So the only time those per user licenses come into play is for Power BI artifacts.
And this is why this conversation is so important, because there's like all these little like gotchas or nuances of things you got to know. You got to know all these little details of like every little thing here to make everything work. Yes, 100% agree. Okay, so one other caveat I guess I'll throw in here. What if you're an organization with an E5? An E5 license is a Microsoft license, and every user in your organization gets an automatic Power BI Pro license with the E5. So like there's all these different ways you can get into Power BI, right? If you have an organization with an E5, you get Power BI Pro by default. It's just something that comes with your licensing. You can go buy Power BI Pro license separately, or you can go buy Fabric capacities that let you do Fabric related things. But if you're going to go work in the workspace, you need an a license, a pro license to get in there. Anyways, lots of things to think about.
We just started it off complicated right from the beginning.
We're trying to give you all the options, right? So, Tommy, you asked about where do I recommend and where do I start doing things, right? So I think Fabric is incredibly useful for the data engineering space. Right? When you're trying to bring data in from semi-structured or structured tables somewhere else, I really like Fabric. My bent is I really like the Lakehouse. I think the Lakehouse is really good for what we need to do reporting wise. And I think a lot of times I'm not thinking about real-time data. I'm thinking about loading like at night and doing a lot of reporting. That's just traditionally what I've been helping companies build and develop. Load it in the evening, in the night, and then have that showing up later on. Excuse me.
Gesundheit.
Oh, excuse me. I had to sneeze there. All right. Then comes the question of where do you start? And a lot of this comes from people like, I think there's a mindset here of a SQL server, right? When I buy a SQL server, I'm going to go use SQL. I can't have the machine fall over. I have to have the right size tables. I have to have the right size compute. It has to have the right amount of speed and memory to make sure that SQL server runs correctly. And I think there's a lot of mindset of I need to design my capacity for my workloads. And I think sometimes we don't really know exactly how heavy those workloads will be inside Microsoft Fabric. So this is going to sound like a cop-out, but I promise you it's not. A lot of this is just try it. Right? Do a simple test, get on a Fabric F2 SKU, and at the cheapest price point, which is the F2, turn it on, build a little simple workload, get it working, get your proof of concept started, and see how much consumption that takes. Most often, you can get at least an MVP or a load of data working or something worked out so that it just physically works. And then you can step back and say, okay, if we're doing a load one time per night, here's how many CUs is consumed. And then you can make the decision of, do you want to increase the speed of delivery of data If so, then you can increase the fabric SKU and go to larger sizes. What I find for most organizations is it's nice to start at the lowest price point, get people comfortable and see the value of the solution. And then we're more easily able to talk about, well, we're going to go to an F2 or an F8 to start scaling up to higher levels. Let me just pause there. That's my impression. Stephanie, what have you seen? Is it similar to what you're doing?
Yeah, two things. And one, even cheaper than the F2 is you can get the trial. So start with
That's
that,
true.
because then you're
Free.
paying $0.
Yep.
But also, I don't think it's a cop out at all what you said. And in this new series on Microsoft Learn that you mentioned
Yes,
earlier,
I'll link to
will
that
come
one.
out
Yep.
like yesterday or something.
Great timing.
That is what they also say is the right way to go for part one for planning your deployment. Start with the POC. It's really, really hard to know upfront how much capacity you're going to need without building something. So I'm going to just back up your claim there.
Okay, good. And Tommy, what about your thoughts? How do you kind of approach capacity
Yeah.
plan? Do you do a lot of testing beforehand? Do you just start the free thing and work from there? What do you do?
So here's the interesting thing with the trial, you don't get the Fabric Capacity Metrics app. So that's only on a capacity that you're actually paying for, I believe. So no,
nope. You still get the Fabric capacity. You can still click the trial in the
trial.
So
Yep.
that's so what Tommy's speaking of, let me just fill people in here real quick. When you build a Fabric capacity, there is an app in the App Store for Power BI. And in there's a Fabric capacity metrics app, which tells you how many CUs, what jobs are running. That analytical data still gets sent to the reporting system. And then you just add in your capacity ID and then it works. So that does work. But Tommy, to your point, though, you are using an F64, which is a much higher version than an F2. So, that was maybe Stephanie, when you were talking about that one, that was maybe one of my caveats of that one. Yes, do the trial, but also note that is an F64 level, and you're not starting at the lowest price point. So that's F64 is a price point with the capacity. Oh, it's like the yearly pricing. It's like roughly around like $5,000 a month or so US.
$5,000 a month for reserved instance.
Reserved
Pay
capacity.
as
That's
you
what
go
I'm
is
thinking.
more like eight. Yeah.
If
you have it on all the time.
Correct. And you can pause things. So yeah, there's a whole bunch. We thought we wouldn't have enough to talk about here for like an hour. And I'm pretty sure we're going to just like have so many things to talk about and options to like tune and optimize this. All right. Sorry. Go back to your Tommy. Go ahead.
And to your point, the trial's fine, but it really doesn't test or put in a lot of pressure tests. You can pretty much run anything. You're great. But a lot of organizations, when they actually do purchase, they're probably not going straight to the F64. A lot
Correct.
of them are probably going to the F2 or the F4. Mike, I've actually seen if you were to try to compare apples to apples, the lowest premium capacity license that there was, which I think was a P2, versus the F2, I'm seeing a much different throttles and bottlenecks with the Fabric because we're running different things. And it's sometimes a lot very hard to test that. So with premium, I could run a ton of my semantic models for an entire middle to small size company. Mike, I was running an F2 test on just my tenant, not a ton of data. And when one thing was running, I couldn't even load Power BI service. It's like, what is going on? So I think there's a lot of things that when you do testing, and if you obviously start small and then you can always scale up. But the problem is you really also need to understand read that capacities app or build your own. But that metrics app is vital to making sure you know, okay, what data are we testing or bringing in? And then that's just for a single department. I'm not going to go into from an enterprise point of view, but Mike, that goes into conversations you and I have had in spades.
Let me a couple of reactions to your comments there, Tommy. So like one of them is being able to observe what's going on, right? So again, a lot of this is new information to people, right? Working in a notebook, brand new. Working in a lakehouse, brand new. Running a pipeline, brand new. Like a lot of these things, we haven't had the experience of running these things inside a Power BI environment. So I'm thinking from a Power BI person, right? Power BI person shows up. We typically connect to like a SQL server, SharePoint, Excel. get our data in, refresh it, we're good, happy, no problem. The only compute we really cared about was how much compute it took us to reload the semantic model and then serve the semantic model. So very simple levels of compute. And it was kind of one package, right? That was kind of like all we had to really worry about. Then we introduced Dataflows Gen 1, which is now a little bit of data engineering in front of the semantic model loading, right? Compute for data loading, compute for semantic model refresh, and then compute for the report. To your point, Tommy, we now have a million other compute usage artifacts now, right? Every time you turn on a notebook, that uses compute. Every time you run a pipeline, that consumes a different level of compute. Every time I run a copy job, that's still different than a pipeline, but still runs at a different rate of compute. So I think, Stephanie, to your point earlier, which was you just kind of need to test some of these things because we're no longer just introducing data flow, semantic model, and reports. We're introducing a whole bunch of other things. And I think those are the things you don't have any context to how expensive or how many CUs you're going to use per those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think also a key point for me that I always have to keep in mind with this, Tommy, you mentioned that, you had their F2 and you were doing some data engineering workload and then you couldn't view the report, right? So a really key concept is that a workspace can only be assigned to one capacity, right? But one capacity can have multiple workspaces. So it's really important to kind of think about your workspace strategy, because maybe in that case, Tommy, maybe you could have just had, another workspace for your Power BI reports with even some pro licenses, maybe a pro workspace. Whereas your engineering is in a different, so this is to me where it gets really complicated is the mixing and matching to save money like that. So really thinking about what goes in what workspace and what capacity can save money.
I like your comments out here. I do a lot of mixing and matching conversations for customers. And so this is an area where I spend a lot of time helping organizations figure out what's the right blend of the different capacities. So let's also add in here this idea of, the free user, right? So we've talked about pro users, premium pro users, and now capacities, right? Buying capacity from Microsoft. I want to introduce this concept of a user who does not have a pro license, but could or still would want to view reports from PowerBI.com or see those reports embedded in other experiences, right? So, hey, our team, a central BI team, is building reports. We want to put them in Teams. We want to put them on SharePoint. That's an embed for your internal organization or embed with users' own data. There's also this idea of I can share my reports with external companies. That's embed for external users. So those also have licensing impacts as well. And the part that I think is the most difficult for people to understand is at an F64 level, when you buy that SKU, free users can start using PowerBI.com. There's a threshold here, and this is the same kind of story. So an equivalent previous metric was an F64 is equal to a P1, a premium one. In that equivalent world, you now have that free user can then show up. They can look at reports. They can build their own stuff using their Fabric.com experience. Anything below that, F2 through F32, that free user is not able to go in and, again, to your point, Stephanie, was not build Power BI related things, right? Because they're still there, those users at those lower SKUs could build like a pipeline, right?
Yes, but also just to be clear,
yes,
to build and share a Power BI item, you do need a pro license, no matter what size SKU you're talking about. Those free users are just for viewing for free at F64 and above. So you still do need the pro to share, publish and share.
I'm going to challenge you on that one. I think the free user can actually make reports at the F64 level. But I would 100% agree with you on the. I had to test this one because this has been a while since I've tested this one. But I'm pretty sure, to your point,
I'm gonna look
a free user can go.
Okay, thanks, Tommy.
A free user can go into an F64, and I 100% agree with you. Look at all the content that's there. I'm with you 100% on the board. Like they don't need a pro license to do that. I agree. But I think at the F64 level, you can actually build reports inside PowerBI.com using a free user at the F64 level. The authoring capability is turned on. I'm pretty sure about that one, but don't quote me on that one. Chat, I'm going to lean on you in this one as well. So chat, confirm with me, does a free user have the ability at an F64 level to author reports? I think the answer is yes, but just chat will check me on this one. So I know someone in chat knows about this. I'll let them go Google it as well. Okay. Let's talk about the tools in the market here a little bit. I want to kind of transition just slightly. So we talked about like the different licensing. We've been talking for like the first 10 minutes of just like different patterns and different licensing options here. Okay. In addition to this article here, I really like what Microsoft is doing. So the one I just sent out in the chat here talks about planning your Microsoft capacity strategy guide overview. And it talks about in the series, you're going to be planning your first deployment, scaling for self-serve analytics, and then scaling for enterprise and managed self-service solutions, and managing your capacity and growth and governance. So I think this article is very useful here about really trying to focus on what is your proof of concept, how do you build the pilot, and then how do you get from pilot to production. And I really like this article that Microsoft gave from like a strategy standpoint, because this is literally the conversation I'm constantly having, which is let's just get something going. Let's get something started. Let's just figure out what the usage looks like. So let me just pause there. What do you think? What are your thoughts on, okay, so the chat, I'm going to come back to my comment earlier. Before I give this over to Stephanie here. Chat is telling me, nope, free users cannot edit any content. They can only consume read content. So Stephanie, you are correct.
Or Power BI. They
Power
can do non-Power BI in Fabric.
True. They can do non-Power BI Fabric-y things, but Power BI reports and semantic models can't do it unless they have a pro license. And that's what the chat is confirming. So if you want to view it, you can do it on an F64. But if you want to edit it and create and do, make Power BI related content, that's a no.
And that's how it was with the PSKU too.
True.
Still need it. Yeah. Yeah. So that remains the same. So yes, clear as mud remains the same. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Let's go over to the article then a little bit more. So what are your thoughts, Stephanie, on the plan your items there?
I'm very happy to see it too, because I feel like this is what I always say. It's nice to have this backup from Microsoft as well, because I always feel a little bit sheepish about saying, I'm sorry, I can't predict what you're going to need. So we really do have to build something before we know. So it's nice to see this written out, this strategy. Like, yes, you pretty much have to do a POC. It's really hard to predict the future. So I do like this a lot.
A couple notes here that I really want to point out here is in the key actions in phase one. So, okay, talking about the proof of concept phase, and then in halfway down the article, it starts talking about key actions in phase one. I really resonate with keep the scope narrow, because sometimes you get into these situations, especially in the consulting space, people just try to boil the ocean. Like, hey, let's do everything. Let's do real time. Let's make a lake house. Let's do it in a SQL. Like, no, time out. What is the main challenge we're trying to address right now? Let's isolate that particular activity and focus only on that item. And then they're also talking about— I
wanted to touch all the parts I needed to. I don't want to just test a lakehouse. So if I do need to ingest from, I do want it to touch all the parts. So I want the lakehouse. I want the notebook. I want the pipeline, the semantic model, and the reports.
I would argue that's probably the most common pattern that I observe, right? The most common pattern is connect to some data, doesn't matter what it is. But then I connect the data, put it in a lakehouse, use a notebook, transform it a little bit, drop it into, and we're doing a lot more testing now with direct lake than we are import modes inside semantic models. So we're doing a lot more direct lake to reporting, all right in the solution. And then also we're doing a lot of testing around where does the column, the artifacts, where should they exist even, right? So when we do, I'm going to bring an analogy here, and again, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong or kind of redirect me here. When you do semantic models and reports or thin reports, in some situations, you may want to have a deployment pipeline, and you may want your semantic models to be captured in its own workspace, because I'm going to share them. I'm going to govern them differently than the report side. So the report, we have a single workspace for all reports. We have a different workspace for all the semantic models. And then we use deployment pipelines to kind of pair the deployments around from dev to test to prod. I feel like this is another thing that we're testing a lot of is, okay, now that we have semantic models, reports, now we have this whole new world of data engineering, lake houses, and we're trying to figure out, where does that exist? Is it one workspace with all the lakehouse pieces in it? Do we have multiple lakehouses with dev, test, prod in the same workspace? Do we need different workspaces for dev, test, prod? Like, there's a lot of thinking about who needs to touch the data and who's allowed to see the different environments as we build them. So a lot of what I'm doing also in this proof of concept phase is really stubbing out the organizational structure and what should be built and which people should have access to what things, right? Because I may need one extra workspace to help segment permissions. Does that make sense what I'm describing there?
It almost feels like we're going back to the world of DBA and databases and servers. I remember that back in the day where it's like, hey, our development is on this license from Microsoft and we have this on premise. So we can test everything you want on dev, but don't do anything on prod. And we're kind of, to me, it's almost going back there where, again, there's the mind shift right now, Mike, because before it's like, having one single, usually premium capacity, that is the capacity that you assign to every workspace. Now people can access your content. Generally speaking, most organizations were, not an enterprise, were fine with a single capacity.
Mm-hmm.
But this is completely changing, and especially even when you think about that proof of concept and putting together a trial run. Well, are you going to just do Power BI? Are you going to try to integrate data? And if that's the case, I mean, I don't think that goes in all a single Fabric capacity in your development, test, and prod, especially with a lot of
like
data. And this is where the concern is right now.
Yeah, Tommy. So you're touching, Tommy, on a point that comes up right next in the article. So Scope 2, or key actions in the development of the pilot phase, right? So now you move away from pilot to the development side. Talk about, and this is what I would also echo with, is you really want to develop on a separate capacity, right? So if you have existing things that are already running in like a P SKU, or you have something else that's in production that's already ready to go, the idea here is you want to separate development work, dev and test potentially, away from the production capacity. And the reason here is for better or worse, smoothing helps. So smoothing inside the Fabric capacity is this concept of, if you overrun or overuse your capacity's number of compute units, CUs, Microsoft will let you borrow from the future, right? So they assume that, look, there's a one job that's running right now. It's very spiky in nature. It has a heavy load. We'll just let you consume all the load you need for a short period of time, knowing that you'll kind of dip back down, and then you'll be able to purchase future compute units and then apply them to that spike, that heavy usage, right? So this is the smoothing concept here that we're talking about. And smoothing, I think, throws things off a little bit. It makes things difficult for people to like see what's actually being used and like what is really affecting what's going on. But that being said, I really do think and believe in the isolation of dev and test capacities away from production capacities. I think those should be separate. And as you become a larger organization, you may also want to think about departmental separations, right? Tommy runs the HR department. Well, actually, Tommy shouldn't run the HR department. That would be
absolutely
bad.
not.
Stephanie runs the HR department, and Tommy runs the engineering department. But in this situation, right, Stephanie, you may have a lot of heavy demands on whatever data you're pulling in, like you're doing some scraping, or you're using heavy notebooks, maybe you're running like machine learning algorithms or things. Your department may need a bit more capacity than Tommy's. And so if we have one capacity for our entire organization, the noisy neighbor applies. Like, Stephanie, you may be using more capacity units than Tommy is, and that might not be acceptable. So when we do chargebacks or figuring out who needs to pay for what level of capacity you're using, again, I'm all for giving everyone Fabric, but I just want you to pay fairly for what you're using, right? So I think that's a use case where you can start separating the Fabric capacities into department level things.
Yes.
Any other thoughts?
Yes, so many.
Okay.
First of all, I'm definitely a noisy neighbor, a troublemaker. But and yeah, so for some of those like dev and test, another reason to separate those into a different capacity is because you can pause them.
Mhm.
And now, with this fabric SKU, like you were saying, F64 is equivalent to P1. There was nothing
Mhm.
smaller before than the P1, and it was fairly expensive. But now that we can have an F2, it's a lot easier to have, it's more affordable to have multiple capacities than it was before in Power BI Premium land. So it gives us a lot more choice, but it's more
Hmm.
complexity too.
I want to unpack that a little bit because I find the story resonates really well with clients around. Let's imagine you're buying one big F64. When we talk about that, sometimes it makes sense for us to divide that up slightly to get better use out of that 64 capacity, right? So I could buy one F64, I could buy an F32 and an F32, that would also be the same thing, or I could buy like an F4, an F8, and then like an F32 and some other pieces. Like, so you can kind of piecemeal together and the neat thing is if you do this with the capacity planning, you can pause this stuff as well. So another thing here to think about is, if you start thinking about splitting your capacities apart, I'm getting a lot of considerations here. Oh gosh, there's so much to think about this topic. I'm so sorry. This is just like as we're talking, I'm literally recalling like the hundreds of conversations I've had around capacity planning. You could even pause things. So like, for example, if you have dev and test as a separate fabric capacity, you may say, look, we don't actually do or need dev and test at nights on weekends. So you can set up a runbook automation. You could turn it off. You could turn it on in the morning, do your dev and testing, and then pause the SKU, turn it off for nights and weekends. Because again, the idea here is you need people to work on those areas like during the business hours. Like there's no reason. So you can save yourself a ton of money if you don't need to use them or run them over the weekend. So pause them and turn them off.
Yeah.
And then you go leave your production stuff on for more. So there's all these different patterns that can come out of this.
And what's wild is even when a capacity is paused, you can still access the data that's in a lakehouse in that paused capacity, for example, by shortcutting to it from another capacity.
So it's just sitting in storage accounts.
Yeah, so you can still access it even if the capacity itself is paused.
I thought you couldn't access the lakehouse when it was paused.
You can.
I mean,
let me give you a link for it.
I'm all off on this one. Yeah, I need a link for this one. So
this is one of my favorites. I love this. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing then, because now that means, so going back to our earlier conversation, right, around, the ability to have multiple workspaces. Like, so we were talking earlier about semantic models and thin reports. This is another good use case for saying we should put the data engineering inside the data engineering side of things. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I'm so sorry for the dog barking. I'm going to mute myself.
Okay.
Mike, though, it sounds great that we can do this, but this really, okay, before I say any hot take here, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Everything that we're talking about, is this required, like this level of detail and attention to detail on turning off, turning on the different workloads, making sure that we set up not just, a single semantic model and get that through the pipeline, but how we're assigning the workspaces and what data we're putting in there. Is this a requirement for companies running Fabric, or is this the advanced kind of thing? Is this the and you'll see why I ask.
Yeah, Tommy, I'm gonna. This is. I will say that this is an overwhelming point, right? This is people very quickly get overwhelmed with. We need help with capacity planning. We need someone to think through it with us. If you don't know these things, how would you ever learn about them? Mm-hmm. Like how would you figure out all these different patterns unless you're like constantly in the tool, starting things up and pausing things, and then building different divisions and building different workspaces, and then again. Stephanie, thanks for the article. I just put it in here. So October 22nd, 2024, Elizabeth says, Use OneLake shortcuts to get data across capacities, even when the production capacity is, or even when the producing capacity is paused. Amazing. Like, great. Shortcuts work when the capacity is not running. Love it. Like, this makes a ton of sense. So I really like this. So this also means further tuning. Run your nightly load on your capacity, turn it on, do the lakehouse thing, run the capacity, pause it, shut it off, and there's a whole bunch of shortcuts you can go use somewhere else. Amazing. So but to your point, Tommy, you made a comment earlier around a SQL DBA. I think this is the same thing. It's a Fabric DBA. something along those lines, right? It's not a DBA for SQL. It's a Fabric DBA where you're being the administrator. Like, these are all the tuning and the optimizing of things, right? And I think we're stepping into a place, you're listening to experts talk about ways of optimizing the compute, get the best out of it.
Okay.
So I think new users aren't going to know this, but take heart. There's whatever your company needs, there's probably a design pattern that will work best for your company. And you can then suck out costs so that and again, back to what Alex and I were talking about earlier, was like this min-maxing, right? There's this idea of a min-max of Fabric. You minimize the cost, but you maximize the usage, right? So people are going to be creative. Companies aren't going to be like, yeah, let's just throw all of our money at this really large Fabric capacity and yeah, we're happy, move on. Like, they're only going to want to spend so much money that it makes sense to get the value out of it. And I think there's a lot of pieces in this, because you could have Fabric in place, you could have it loading data in, but if you don't have people on your team who understand how to like properly use Power BI, properly build semantic models, build fast reports, all of those things can detract from the attractiveness of like this one solution that gives you everything you need. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And
I'm gonna pause there.
Stephanie, I'm going to let you run with that one. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, Tommy, to your point about, what if you don't know all of these ins and outs? I mean, just look at our conversation here between the three of us. We're like, wait, does it work that way or is it this
Yes.
way? Right.
Yeah.
But so I think the answer is, if you don't care about money, just get a big capacity. Then you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Then you don't have to
that's the secret. So
That's funny.
and I think this is the concern, is a lot of, I mean, we've already dealt with people running like Wild West and somehow breaking Power BI before, and it was just get a capacity and assign it. That was it.
Mhm.
And that's why we would come in, because everything was broken or whatever the case was. Now you're adding all these other things where it's like, hey, just get a Fabric capacity, but that's really not it. I mean, to a degree, because yeah, you can have a single F2 capacity and put everything on it, but I think we're making it sounds very clear in this conversation, at least that we're having, is you're not going to be very successful that way. And I think this is a big point of what I think we're not realizing when it comes to planning, more importantly, from adoption, right? And I think for a lot of organizations, when they're looking at more than just, hey, we're going to move from Power BI Premium to Fabric, I don't think how many organizations are doing that, or are they saying we're going to move our existing data warehouses and lake houses to Fabric, or probably the other scenarios, we're going to test creating a lake house with some of our marketing data in Fabric. Well, they're just thinking, just buy a Fabric capacity, all the workspaces, just like Premium. But I think there's a thrust point, or there's a pressure point here that a lot of organizations are going to face when they start thinking, I can do Fabric everything. I can do all the notebooks and all the lake houses. And I think this is where the concern's coming in, where it's like, well, I had 10 semantic models before, and so I should be able to run a single notebook or the data flow. But when you realizing what's throttling on top of that, the Fabric capacity is also, your capacity units for your semantic model rendering and people viewing it. So there's a lot more. I think this proof of concept becomes very complicated to me.
Yes, my dog agrees exactly. And to your point, Mike, about, back to school families, that's exactly what was just happening.
Oh,
Kids
yes.
leaving for school, dogs freaking out. So apologies about that.
No,
Um,
it's fine.
but yeah, like I think like anything, it's really optimize or throw money at it, right? I don't think this is limited to fabric.
Yeah.
It's all
This
of
could be
these
anything.
tools.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we overbuy SQL servers and Azure SQL servers. You overbuy on-prem servers because you don't want to come back and have to ask for more funding later on. I mean, it's definitely a political game that you're playing here to some degree. Where I'd like to kind of maybe move the conversation would be is really love the documentation that Microsoft's providing, but I also want to kind of start saying like, out this capacity planning guide article that I'm reading or has been published literally yesterday is probably one of the most comprehensive places I've seen, like full thoughts around capacity planning and dev planning and which isolation environments. But there are a number of other tools out there to at least help you estimate what you may need to do. And so I want to kind of point out a couple other tools that exist here as well. One of them being Microsoft's own Power BI load assessment tool itself. So they actually have a Power BI capacity load assessment tool that you can go use. So a load assessment tool is basically a script, a GitHub workspace that you can go use, and you can run the tool directly from there. And what it will do is it'll simulate multiple users running reports on a capacity. So you can stand something up. It has a bunch of sample reports. And so this is an assessment tool you can kind of use. So this is one area where you could turn on one of these trials, an F64 trial, turn on the assessment tool, do something. Okay, how many users do we have? 50? Great. You can kind of plug in some numbers here and say we can do a test for 20, 10, and 20 and see how that scales up. Because one of the things I think it's very challenging for people here is every semantic model is different and they're all tuned to various degrees. If you have a really high performant semantic model, you could easily serve thousands of reports to thousands of users on a F2. I do it. Right? We have an app that we run right now today that has thousands of users per month hitting a report. But the semantic model is stupid simple. There's like nothing to it. It's literally just data that's in there, and it's a lot of it can cache, right? So a lot of the queries are cached. You don't need a lot of interactivity. So the report itself is actually really optimized for rendering and sharing the data, like showing the information. Again, this is all around theming, one of the tools that we build. That's not always the case. Stephanie, you're in HR and you've got all these things, and your semantic model might have complex DAX in it or whatever, right? Those things could impact your capacity because this is where it gets so like it depends kind of conversation is because whatever you put into the capacity really is the knowledge of all these things. You have to be good at optimizing more than just one thing. Does that make sense? Let's pause right there.
Yes, it does. And I'm so glad that you mentioned tools and calculators because I know we're running out of time and we actually had a bunch of those that we wanted to share,
We
right?
do.
Because some of this is trying to plan and some of this is monitoring. And we have fortunately tools for both and they're both important.
Correct. So let's go after there is a Microsoft capacity planning overview, which we already went through the article. That's already in the chat as well. You'll see here the load assessment tool I just put in the chat right now. So that's for the load assessment. These links are also in the description as well. I believe Data Witches here also has a licensing calculator. So Stephanie, you came up with your own calculator that I'll also put in the chat here as well, that you kind of decided, here's how you want to test. You can enter some information in. Walk us through your calculator. How does this work for you?
Yeah, so this one I actually built before Fabric, so it was Power BI Premium, just because even then it was a little bit complicated to know. Should I do
True.
Pro? Should I do PPU? Should I do PSQ? So I
Makes sense.
adapted it for Fabric. And I think it's helpful to use this in conjunction with the other one you're going to mention, which is the Fabric Capacity Estimator, because the
Yes.
Fabric Capacity Estimator, that's not going to tell you, okay, based on your inputs, you actually don't need a Fabric capacity. You could stick with PPU. This is going to tell you a Fabric capacity. But you can
Yes.
use our Data Witches calculator in those cases where you're thinking, do I need will a Fabric capacity benefit my situation? Or can I also consider just Pro or PPU? So I think these two together can help in that situation. You also don't need to have as many inputs for the data, which is one, as for the official Microsoft one. So I think those two together
Yeah.
that can help with that a lot. But yeah, mine came out of the I mentioned before I have a nonprofit background, so I'm used to trying to do things on a shoestring. So I was really heavy in that min max thing. You know, I don't want to get
Yeah.
more than I need. So
Exactly
that's where
right.
that one came from.
And again, when you're in the nonprofit space, you're trying to best optimize for, donors only give so much, right? Their dollars only go so far. So you have to always be as mindful as how can I optimize everything? How can we do things as efficiently as we possibly can with the tools that we're given? So love that. I will also echo, again, this is not a ding against Microsoft, but I'll just kind of maybe make a note here is the Fabric Capacity Estimator. This is the link I just put in the chat right now. This is really, to your point, I want to double down on this. It is Fabric only. It is not trying to tell you, and that's one of my maybe pet peeves or something like this. If I enter in only things here that are like, wait, I am only going to enter in like the total size of your data when compressed in gigabytes. They start off with like 100 gigabytes as the starting point for the tool. Like, who on their right mind is starting with, you know what? I should really think about capacity planning. Oh, and by the way, my semantic model has 100 gigabytes in it. Like like you're hitting the wrong market, bud. Like we're well beyond, like if you're at 100 gigabyte semantic models, you are clearly not in the right zone for tuning and optimizing your capacity. I guarantee you're already doing this at some degree. So, and there's no way of having, like, to your point, Stephanie, was like, what if I have a 50 megabyte semantic model? I can't enter that into their tool, and the tool doesn't say, look,
Right.
I see what you're doing here. You're actually still good to stay at a pro user level. Like, so there's like some other, I think there should be some level of like recommending, okay, yes, this is Fabric capacity pricing, but it should also route you at the beginning of this. Do you feel like you need Fabric? Tell me what kind of things you want to do. And then from there, I can like give you some suggestions around that. But that's one of my rubs there in the beginning. Like if you just selected, okay, let's say I have a 1 gigabyte data model and I'm only going to use Power BI, and I have like a minimal amount of viewers, it just recommends an F2, which in my mind, it should also just say, well, maybe you should just consider pro or premium per user. Like there may need to be like a little bit of a caveat of this also might be a workload that's effective for this other space. So I think it's a little bit misleading,
You're still
or it's
going to
assuming
need pro licenses in that case anyway. So your F2 is actually
correct.
not doing anything for you.
And that's, yes, exactly right. So I think there's a little bit of edge case stuff of what the tool, I guess they kind of assume a bit of extra things like, hey, as soon as you add a data factory and then add some things, yeah, maybe it makes a bit more sense there. So anyways, other thoughts around this Fabric capacity tool. Tommy, have you played with it a bit? What do you think?
Man, I miss the old Power BI premium calculator. Just show me how many people were viewing reports, how many people were building, how many semantic models you had. It was pretty straightforward. This, if you're coming from Power BI, do you know what a batch cycle is? And can you tell me how many tables you have, not just now, but are going to go into Fabric? And probably, again, I think it seems like what from our conversation we already had about the different way we want to, in a sense, structure and the logistics of Fabric capacities and workspaces. This goes along perfectly with that because this is DBA. This is now we have entered the world of IT, my friends, when it comes to database administration, database management. Because I guarantee you the data size compressed batch cycles, those are foreign to most people in Power BI unless you, again, worked in the DBA side or worked in the like closer up to IT.
Mm-hmm.
There's 3 things for Power BI. For the data, they're the only thing when it has for the data factory is hours for daily GenFlow operations, data flow Gen 2, which I thought was hilarious. And yeah, like it's just, I think for a lot of users, like, doesn't matter how many lake houses I have. What if we're just getting a bunch of data in raw? Like, how much does that cost? I think that's what a lot of people want to know.
Yeah, I think we're probably just about a time here, so it's probably wise for us to start thinking about our final thoughts on how we want to kind of wrap this conversation up. There's a lot of really good tools out there. So I think we shared like two main ones. I think that I would spend time on is learning, is working on the Data Witches tool for licensing calculator. I think that's a really good input model that you can use. I also think the Fabric Capacity app that Microsoft provides is decent. The one that I'm most impressed with right now is the Fabric Capacity documentation Microsoft has given, because I think this is a very large point of confusion, and the article that's being presented here is really well written and gives you a lot of the considerations and recommendations I would be supplying to customers already. So my final thought here, I think, is going to wrap up is, look, if you're just hearing about this now and saying, wow, I really do want to use Fabric and I do need some help and support designing the right mix of per user licensing and capacity based licensing, and what features do I need to use and what do I think I not need to use, this is where I'm going to pitch all of us. All of us are in the consulting business. We all have our own consultant firms. We all do this. So if you want help, reach out to us. Let us know. Like, find all of our names are in the description below. If you want someone to support you and give you like the alternative options, or help you walk through the design or the system design, this is where, if you don't know how to do this, you probably should I'd recommend going find someone who understands the intricacies of the licenses pieces and can help you design which users, which licenses, how to scale up, how to divide workspaces. I mean, that's what we do. We help users with that. So I would say reach out to someone who knows this. Go find a consulting firm that has this, and you only need to do that once. Once you get through this pattern, you'll know, right? So that if you don't know, you'll learn. And then from there, you'll have the ability to do this on your own and design things. So that's one area I would recommend, is just hire some consultants, go through some, ask them what they think, and we'll all help you with that. So that's kind of where I'd lean this one. Stephanie, where do you think? Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. So definitely use those two tools if you're just trying to figure out where to get started, what sizing you need, etc. But then, of course, like you said, the article is great, and I love the idea of, you really do need to build out a POC, a pilot. We didn't get to cover too in depth today the capacity metrics app, but that's a critical piece of all of this. So as you're building, you really need to get some understanding of that app. And I think, Mike, you did put a helpful article in there about how to read that app. It's a little bit old, the article. The app has changed a bit, but it's really, really helpful with some of the concepts. So I think that those go hand in hand. You've got your calculators, your kind of planning, but then the monitoring is key. So
yeah, I agree with that one
as well.
That's a really good suggestion. I really like the idea of like, just do stuff and see what comes out of it. What is the modern? Because then you can always adjust later on. Tommy, what are your final thoughts?
No, I think for a lot of us, as we start getting ready to jump into Fabric, our organization this is not your father's Power BI. And it's really the planning here, the proof of concept, I think, is going to make or break what you do. Because if your organization just runs into this and saying, we're going to just try everything, and everything slows down and everything bogs down, and you're spending, the likelihood that people are going to buy in is very low. So have a plan, not just for the feature sets, but for the back end and what's going to make sense.
I like that one. That's a good thing to keep reminding ourselves, is to narrow the scope down to what you only need to build. Because you can get distracted by a lot of other things, and it muddies the water around, well, how much capacity did I actually use? What is really going on here? So that's a really good point, Tommy. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I want to thank everyone for attending and listening to the podcast today. We really appreciate it. Even the dogs are happy, so that's awesome. We had a couple barks here throughout the episode. That way, it's actually live. Like, this is we were not filtering this out. This is all as it happens in real time. So we'll see. For those of you who get it on Apple and Spotify, we'll see if Tommy's editing is able to cut out some of the dog pieces in there. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But that being said, thank you all very much for listening. I hope you found this to be informative. I hope you found some links here that were interesting. There's a ton of links in the description below. Make sure you check out those links, click on those links, and go learn more about licensing calculators, and how to design your Fabric and or Power BI environment so it best works for your organization. One thing I'm just super happy about is we have options. Like it's not like we have only one tool and one way of doing things. We do have many different options to perform better and to get the right balance of value and price for what we're doing inside Microsoft Fabric, which I'm very pleased with. That being said, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with somebody else. Let somebody else know you found value from talking about licensing and capacity planning and organizational structure here as well. I know, riveting, right? Everyone's probably thrilled about hearing that kind of conversation. But we do it. As experts in this space, we have to figure this stuff out. Anyways, that being said, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, idea, or topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of PowerBI.tips social media channels.
If you'd like to support the channel, please become a member down below. We actually have just recently opened up membership, so you can listen to all the episodes for free with no ads down below as a member. So if you like this episode and you want to have all the episodes with no advertising, feel free to go down below and the links below and check those things out. Anyways, thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.